Welcome to Piano Video Lessons. I'm Lisa, and today we're working on Grade 1 Piano Technical Exercises and Etudes. This is Unit 1 of Year 2. In our last lesson, we worked on playing solid triads, the major triads for Grade 1. We learned the C major, the G major, and the F major triads in root position and inversions. And this is going to come in handy for today's lesson, because today we're going to be learning to play Study in C by Carl Czerny. And in this lesson, you'll see that we're going to be using the inversions of the chords that we learned in our last lesson. So hopefully you're comfortable recognizing the different triads in their inversions, and let's get started. So this is found on page 11 of your ebook. You can find it right here, and if you'd like to get a copy of the ebook, just click the link in the info card or in the video description to take you to pianovideolessons.com if you're not there already. Alright, so let me play this piece for you, and then we'll break it down and learn it. So here it goes. Study in C. So there's quite a few elements to this piece that we're going to have to really be careful about. And first of all, I'd like to draw your attention to the overall look of the piece. There's some important aspects that we should always look at before beginning to play something. So the first question that we can ask is, what key is it in? And obviously it's Study in C, so we know that it's in the key of C major. And another question that we can ask is, what is the time signature? So the time signature tells us how many beats to count in each measure, and it's found at the beginning of the piece. In this case, it has this little symbol at the beginning. It just looks like a letter C, because it is. And that stands for common time. And the most common time signature is 4/4 time. That is what the C means. We're playing in 4/4 time, so we'll count 4 quarter notes in each measure. Then we can also look and see what is going on in this piece. What are the dynamic markings? How loud or soft should we play this particular piece? So it starts off playing mezzo forte, and I see that here, and then looking through, not too much else to note, except at the very end we see this mark, which is called a diminuendo, and that's going to make sure that we get diminuendo. I can't write and talk at the same time, that's a U. Diminuendo means to gradually get quieter. And then we can also look to see what is the metronome or the tempo marking at the beginning of the piece. And this is something that we'll pay more attention to once we have it fully learned, because the tempo indicates how fast to play, but we should only really play as fast as we're comfortable. And the tempo here is allegro. And allegro means to play quickly and lively. It's an Italian term for quick and lively. So in this etude in C by Czerny, we're going to be playing in C major in 4/4 time, mostly mezzo forte, and playing allegro. Now there are also some other articulation marks that we can look out for in this piece. One of them is legato. So let me just grab another color here. We've got a marking like this, a slur over all of the notes, will tell us to play legato. That's a smooth connected touch. And we also see notes that have a dot on the opposite side to the stem. So the note stem on one side, dot on the other, and that is a staccato. And a staccato touch is a sort of a bounce or a lift or a short note. They're really crisp sounding. So bouncy, crisp, short notes. And that is all the different touches that we're going to need in order to play this piece. So what you may have noticed, and what we will look at together, is that this has a repetitive rhythmic pattern. So if you just look at the first two measures, and then look at the second two measures, they look very much the same in terms of the shapes that they appear on the page. Same with this next set of two measures. Very similar shapes. And then at the end of the piece, something different happens. So this is going to be the part that's most technically tricky for you to play, because when you get to it, it's going to be different than the rest. So that's a very good place to start playing this piece. Now we can also look at the the shapes of the notes. So I like to do a lot of prep before playing. As you can tell, we're still talking. We have not played this piece. We haven't started practicing it yet. I played it for you, so you know how it's going to go. But we need to see how it's going to feel. And the best way to do that is to do lots of studying beforehand. So the next thing that I like to look at are the patterns. And we talked a little bit just now about the patterns, the bigger patterns. But let's look at the other types of patterns, such as, so these are bigger phrase patterns, where we just saw that there's, these two measures and two measures and two measures have similar styles. Then we can also look for the patterns which are the chords. And we can also look at patterns which are the interval distances between the notes that we have to play. And the chords also have intervals involved. So we talked a lot about intervals over the course of our studies together, and if you're not familiar with intervals, you can just click an info card here, and I'll take you to a lesson to help you think a little bit about intervals. Now, let's see here. When we're reading this first block of notes, I see a left hand playing intervals up and down. So it goes, I'm not even going to play out loud yet. It goes 5 and then up, 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 down, 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 down. So this is just a pentascale, and you can see it by looking. A whole bunch of notes moving by neighbor up and down. At the same time, the right hand is playing 3 notes, probably a triad. In fact, it is. So remember in our last lesson, we talked about identifying the note that floats above and knowing that that note will represent your tonic, or the root of this chord. We see the root of this chord is the C at the top. And this chord is in first inversion, and we learned how to play those in our last lesson. So we're going to play C first inversion chords. Now, understanding what's happening here, we're holding a C first inversion chord while we play a C pentascale. That will sound good together. And then we lift the left hand, there's a rest down here. The right hand continues with 3 right hand first inversion triads. So let's go ahead and just figure out what's happening with the right hand. We're going to start off with those 3 notes and play them in solid form, holding for 4 beats plus 1. This is a tie, connecting the 5 beats to the 1, keep holding, and then 3 bouncing notes. So we're holding for 5, and then we're bouncing for 3. And then there's a different chord. Let's look and see what the left hand is doing. We're having a C pentascale, 1, 2. Okay, so we're running up the notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, off. So 1, on, off. Okay, so it starts on beat 1. So the entire time that this 5 beats are happening, your left hand is busy. Then they both lift off, and the right hand plays. So we can count this. Let's go slowly. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and off, 2 and 3 and 4 and I'm playing the left hand connected with legato and the right hand staccato. So now let's play the next 2 measures. Let's first look at them. I see a similar pattern in the left hand, but now beginning on the bottom line note, which is G, and I'm looking at the right hand and I see a root position triad. That looks like a nice little snowman, so we know it's in root position, and the root on the bottom is G. So we're just going to move our hand up slightly and play that G root position triad along with a G pentascale. Both come off, and the right plays 3 more quarter notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now if this is tricky for you, you need to slow it down. Off. So make a little note to yourself right here that you need to come off with both hands so that these rests in your left hand are being observed during the staccato. Some people will do this. Notice I'm still holding the G. The G ends on beat 1 of this measure. All right, looking at the next line, I see further down, so we've gone from C down to G. We started on C, we went down to G, and now we're going down to C again. And you can see here in the right hand, we have another triad, another set of 3 notes, and you can see that there are 2 notes floating above the 4th. So we know that this is a second inversion triad, and we can locate the root at the top of the 4th, and we see that that middle note there is C. So here we have a second inversion C triad. So I can play that in the right hand for 5 beats, and then bounce while my left hand is down here doing a C pentascale, but a nice low one. Off. So there we have it. Let's try from the very top, starting with C first inversion and C pentascale. Moving to G. Moving to C. Now, this next part is where it gets tricky. Right now, my left hand has to get up here in a big reach, and my right hand also has to move. So both hands need to be repositioned at this point in the piece. The best thing to do is to start to prep your left hand for moving way back here, so that while you're simply playing these repeated chords, you're going to go hold this and then lift and start to move. Now, this distance you have to reach is a seventh. So the distance is a very large interval. And if you look at 3, 4, 5, the staff, you can see the bottom note here is on the bottom line, and the next note is up here on the fourth line. So this takes us from G to F. If we were to go one note higher than F, that would take us to G again. And that is an octave. So from G to G here is an octave, 8 notes. And it's from a line all the way up to a space. So even numbered intervals are always a combination of space and line. And then what the notes we had to actually play are one note smaller. That's what it sounds like. Here you have it. That's a minor seventh. That's the sound of a minor seventh. Those are the first two notes from a really old version of Star Trek. I wonder if you know that song at all, from Star Trek from the 70s or something. But you can hear those first two notes, that minor seventh. And so the distance of a seventh is something that you're going to get used to seeing in music and also feeling on the piano. So when you feel a seventh, you're going to skip over, this is the fifth, this is the relaxed position of 5 notes. You're going to skip that next note and reach, so that you're now opening your hand so that there are 2 keys that are being jumped over by this opening here. So here we have the 7th, and the way this finishes is hold for 2, and then you're going to bring your 4 and 2 in to play a skip with C and E. So it's a 7th with G on the bottom, and then a skip with C on the bottom. So you might notice also that I'm referencing often groups of notes or patterns, and we talked about this in when I was doing the online piano conference, and my session was on sight reading, and I talked a lot about looking for patterns. And it's more important to know your starting notes and then read from those notes by interval, or how far apart the notes are. So in the case of the pentascale, we're just playing notes that are neighbors. They're moving by intervals that are called seconds, playing the first and then the second note. And then when we finish here, the interval that we're looking for is that big 7th. We're going to reach, and then we're going to close up and play a 3rd. But now if you notice, if you relax your hand toward your thumb, you're going to have that nice 3rd. I think I said 2nd, but I meant to say 3rd. It's a skip, which is a 3rd. Now the right hand at the end also has to move. It has to move up to here. Now that distance is aligned to a space. And so when we have a combination of line and space notes, we know that's an even numbered interval, and you can recognize that it's smaller than an octave, and so it's the next number, even number down from 8, which is 6. So here we have B on the bottom. We just open one note. So it's a bit like when we play the G first inversion triad, but the D is missing. So it's a G first inversion with no D, if that helps at all. And then we're going to play a neighbor and a skip, and we leave our thumb there. So that's nice. Once we're opened up to that place, we actually do play the D from that first inversion. We just have to play one note in between, and then we're going to close our hand to play the 2 on the C that we had just previously reached over. So you probably want to practice that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, rest, 3, 4. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, rest, 3, 4. Now the left hand is going to play the 7th. And again, now when you close this into C, you're also going to close this in to play that skip, fingers 4 and 2. So here's that ending. And we can also get softer and softer. 1 softer, because of that diminuendo that's marked inside the music. So my suggestion would be to practice this last part quite a bit because it feels very different from the rest of the piece. The rest of the piece almost gets practiced triple the amount if you were to play it straight through because there's so much similarity between those first 3 sections, those first 3 phrases. And then you should also practice this leap. So the best way to practice a leap is to set yourself up where you leave from. So I'm setting my left hand up down here, and I'm setting my right hand up here. And now I'm in position, and I already told you that it's a good idea to start moving the left hand first, so it's ready, but you really only have this one beat to get your right hand up to the next note. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, jump. Now I missed the left hand note here. That's because I'm thinking about the right hand, and we're going to talk about that. So when we play these triads, the thing that you need to do in order to hit these notes accurately is you need to know where you're going, and it's helpful to use your eyes to look where you're going. So I could do 2 things. I could get my thumb ready and then open, because that's possible. My 3 is playing C, so I can prepare to move up there. It's just a little open. Or I can keep this distance of a 6th that I've already got on the outside of this chord from a line to a space. I've got a 6th here already, and then I could just hop it up by keeping the distance the same. You could practice that. Relax your hands and play a 6th. Ooh, I missed. I played a 5th. And play a 6th. So hang your hands down and land on a 6th. Get used to that feeling of landing on a 6th. It's super easy to land on a 5th because we're used to that distance of every finger having its own note. But here we are now in grade 1. There's going to be lots of times when our hand is not going to fall in a neat little 5-finger position. So going from here, from the E on the top to the G on the top, you could practice this. This is the feeling of a 6th. Okay, I think you get it. So now I'm going to play from back here, and I'm going to stop. And I'm going to talk. I'm moving my left hand, and now I'm preparing my right, getting softer. And this part's easy, because it's doing the same thing again. But this might be a little bit of a challenge, just getting those last notes on time. All right, so the thing with this piece is to identify for yourself what you find most challenging. Some of this will be easy, some of it will be tricky. I've made a list of things that you should be listening for when you practice. So the first thing is, you'll know that you have this piece learned when you can play it with all correct notes. So you do want to make sure the notes are right. Slow down if you're making mistakes. You'll know that you got it learned when you're using consistent and practical fingers. So there's a lot of finger numbers written in here. Those are probably the ones you should play. But most importantly, you should use the same ones every time. So if you find that something here doesn't work for you, then change it and use it consistently, the new fingering. You should play it with a steady beat. So you could set a metronome, you could just keep a pulse, can even just listen. I like to sometimes say rhythm words. When I was in school, learned words like titi and ta, and when I'm teaching young students, I'll use words like puppy and dog, which would end up sounding like this. Puppy, 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 dog, 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 dog. Puppy, 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 dog, 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 dog. Puppy, 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 dog, 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 dog. Dog, 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 dog. Rest. 3, 4. Or you could just count. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. So that will help you with your steady beat. You can go slowly if you need to. You'll also want to make sure that you're lifting the rests in the left hand, as we discussed, bouncing the staccato notes in the right hand, looking out for the dynamics, and then once you're sure that this is all going well and you're comfortable, you can make sure that you're playing it allegro, which is quick and lively. And then the biggest challenge, and if you were taking an exam, they would be listening for this as well, to make sure that your left hand is being played smoothly and evenly, and that your right hand chords are landing solidly together. Just as when we did our exercise in the previous lesson, we want to make sure that those notes are crisp and landing together. None of them are hitting ahead of the others. And also this left, you want to make sure that your legato is smoothly connected, and that none of the fingers are like bouncing out like. So you heard some awkward, lumpy sounds there. We don't want any of that. So those are all of the things that you can listen for. I suggest recording yourself playing the piece when you think it's ready, and then listen back a bunch of times and check each of these things each time you listen. Were my notes right? Or does my fingering look comfortable? Was my beat steady? Was I lifting the rests in my left hand? Was I bouncing my staccatos? Did I remember to get softer? Was I playing allegro? And could I hear those smooth left hand notes and the bouncing right hand notes? I also asked a few little questions in here if you're looking to just remind yourself about some of the elements of this piece. We're going to locate and play just the starting notes for each hand position and circle any that give you difficulty. So this is a good starting exercise, and we went through it mostly together before we played, but basically it's like identifying where does that pattern start. Where does this pattern start? Where does this pattern start? And then we've located the start of this pattern. More importantly, the left hand has to start first on C, and then it has to move to G, then it has to move down to C, then we move up to that seventh. So that's a very good exercise to go through before you play. And then it says the notes of the chords, which triads are they? And we did review that as well. Look for the different types of articulation. Look for the different types of rhythm. Well, we could write that down. It says to write them here, but I'm going to write them on this page here where it's nice and big. The first type of rhythm that we have is the whole note, which will hold for 4 beats. And against the whole note in the left hand, we have an eighth note, or we have running eighths. Then we also have quarter notes. They start off in the right hand with this first chord. And we don't see any other rhythms until the second last measure, where the left hand is playing half notes, and those hold for 2 beats. You could also write the rhythms of the rests. So we have a quarter rest, that's 1 beat, and we have a half rest, that's rest for 2 beats. So that is the study in C by Carl Czerny, and in our next lesson we're going to come back and do a little bit more technical studies, a little bit more exercises. We're going to do the broken triads that go along with the solid triads for the major keys in right hand and left hand. So come on back, and I'll see you in the next lesson.